I'm Beatrice, a 72-year-old retired chief accountant, and I recently spent exactly $35,000 on my granddaughter's 16th birthday party. That price tag covered a luxury villa in Laguna Beach, 5-star catering, a professional film crew, and even a little something from Tiffany & Co. But just 1 week before the big day, I received a message that changed everything. This is the story of how I uncovered a stage of lies built by my very own family. If this story resonates with you, I hope you'll give it a like, share it with a friend, and follow along for more. And please, don't forget to leave a comment with your own story, because sometimes just being heard is the greatest comfort of all. Every beginning, whether it's sweet as sugar or a bitter pill to swallow, seems to start on a Sunday. For me, that's just an unwritten rule. Sunday afternoons in my house usually have a particular scent, the smell of old newspapers, a faint hint of chamomile tea, and the kind of peace that I reckon only folks who have walked most of their life's journey can truly appreciate. At 72, after 45 years as a chief accountant, the order of numbers and the quiet of a familiar space were all I ever needed. I was used to the slow, gentle rhythm of a day winding down, with the golden afternoon sun stretching across my hardwood floors, and the steady tick-tock of the old grandfather clock in the corner. But on that particular Sunday, the peace was broken, not by a sudden noise, but by a subtle shift in the air. The doorbell rang at precisely 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the usual time my son, Daniel, would bring his family over for a visit. I smiled, setting down my teacup, already picturing the plate of gingerbread cookies I'd baked that morning. They were Madison's, my only granddaughter's, absolute favorite. But when I opened the door, the picture before me didn't quite match the one I'd painted in my mind. It was just Cynthia and Madison. Daniel wasn't there. My daughter-in-law Cynthia looked stunning as always. Her blonde hair was perfectly coiffed, her cream-colored silk dress clung to a figure she'd spent a fortune in time and money to maintain, and the smile on her lips was radiant, but it never quite reached her eyes. Those eyes, if you looked long enough, held a carefully concealed tension, a hurriedness that didn't fit the leisurely pace of a weekend afternoon. And then there was my Madison. She stood there, a 16-year-old angel with flowing chestnut hair and big, clear, round eyes. She was wearing a white blazer over a designer t-shirt, a style far more mature than her years. She was dazzling, a picture of youthful confidence and vitality. But instead of the warm box of cookies I was expecting, the thing Cynthia was carrying so formally was a thin leather briefcase, and in Madison's hand was a tablet, its screen glowing brightly. "Hi, Mom," Cynthia said, her voice sweet but a little rushed. "Daniel had a last-minute meeting with a client. He sends his apologies." I nodded, trying to hide a flicker of disappointment. "Daniel seemed to be having a lot of last-minute meetings lately. That's all right, dear, work is important. You two come on in." Madison stepped forward and gave me a big hug. It was a tight squeeze, and I could smell her expensive perfume, some delicate fragrance that girls her age dream of. "I missed you, Grammy," she whispered in my ear, and my old heart just melted. Every sharp observation, every keen analysis of a retired accountant, it all turned to mush in that embrace. "I missed you too, my Maddie," I replied, patting her back gently. We settled onto the sofa in the living room, where the afternoon light was dancing on the old Persian rugs. I was about to get up to fetch the tea and cookies, but Cynthia stopped me. "Mom, please, you sit," she said, placing the leather briefcase on the table. "We didn't just come to visit today. We have something very special to share with you. Or rather, Madison has a project she'd like to present." The word project sounded so foreign coming from Cynthia in this setting. I looked at Madison. She had straightened her back, her hands placed neatly on her knees, the tablet resting face down on her lap. Her expression was no longer that of a granddaughter visiting her Grammy. It was the look of someone about to enter a high-stakes negotiation. A feeling of curiosity mixed with a vague sense of unease began to creep in. "A project?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "What kind of project is so serious?" Cynthia smiled, the kind of smile a PR manager gives right before a major product launch. "You'll see in a moment. Madison, honey, are you ready?" Madison took a deep breath and gave a firm nod. She picked up the tablet, swiped the screen, and a professional-looking presentation appeared. The first line of text was elegantly designed, standing out against a trendy pastel pink background. "The personal brand launch event, Madison Sinclair." I squinted. Personal brand? A 16-year-old girl? I'd heard these terms on the news, in articles about the digital world, but I never thought they'd show up in my own living room, coming from the granddaughter I still pictured as a little girl who loved reading stories and eating gingerbread cookies. "Grammy," Madison began, her voice clear, confident, and surprisingly resonant in the quiet room. "As you know, over the past few years, I've built a pretty solid platform on social media, especially TikTok and Instagram. I have a loyal following, and more importantly, I've created my own voice, a brand that young people trust." She spoke so fluently without a single hesitation, as if she'd rehearsed this speech 100 times. Her eyes were fixed on mine, not with the loving gaze of a grandchild, but with the focused stare of a presenter trying to win over an investor. Cynthia, playing the role of a capable assistant, discreetly clicked a small remote. The tablet screen changed to another slide, displaying a flurry of impressive numbers, follower counts, engagement rates, monthly video views. The figures danced before my eyes. To an accountant, numbers never lie, but they can certainly be arranged to tell a very specific story, and the story Cynthia and Madison were telling was one of success and limitless potential. "These aren't just vanity numbers, Grammy," Madison continued, pointing to a steep growth chart. "This is a community, this is influence. And now, it's time to take that influence to the next level. It's time to turn Madison Sinclair from a name online into a real-life brand." I listened in silence, half of my mind admiring her poise and ambition, the other half starting to feel a deep sense of unease. The way she spoke about herself as a product, a business entity, felt so impersonal. It seemed the little girl I knew had been replaced by another version, a carefully programmed one. "And to do that," Madison emphasized, her tone growing more formal, "I need a bombshell event, an official launch party." The next slide appeared, and my heart skipped a beat. It was a picture of a magnificent villa with floor-to-ceiling glass walls looking out over the blue Pacific Ocean. An infinity pool sparkled in the sunset. The caption below read, "Venue, Oceanfront Villa, Laguna Beach." "My 16th birthday party," Madison announced, "won't just be a party. It will be the Madison Sinclair Personal Brand Launch Event. This will be the springboard for me to sign major endorsement deals, to network with key people in the industry, and to solidify my position." She began to rattle off terms I only vaguely understood. Her vision was to become an icon for Gen Z. Her mission was to inspire a lifestyle of class and purpose. The party would be attended by other Coles, key opinion leaders, famous photographers, and representatives from fashion and cosmetic brands. Everything would be filmed, edited into a viral video to be posted on Y and TikTok, creating a powerful media wave. Throughout Madison's presentation, Cynthia sat quietly, occasionally nodding in approval or offering an encouraging smile, but I could see the tension in her every muscle. Her eyes never left my face, scrutinizing my every expression, my slightest frown. She was like a director watching her lead actress on stage, while also being the one most worried about the reaction from the only audience member who mattered, the sole powerful judge of this play. I, a retired old woman whose greatest pleasure was solving the morning paper's crossword puzzle, was suddenly thrust into a world of vision, mission, and bombshell springboards. It was glamorous, it was compelling, and it was utterly alien. I looked at the passion in Madison's eyes, a passion that was calculated down to the last detail. She wasn't just sharing a dream, she was pitching a business plan. When the final slide appeared, a professionally edited portrait of Madison with a brilliant smile, and the words, "The future starts here," she set the tablet down on the table, folded her hands, and looked at me expectantly. Silence filled the room, broken only by the tick-tock of the grandfather clock, a sound from the past trying to hold on to the present. "Well," I said, my voice sounding huskier than usual. "That's truly impressive, Maddie. You've prepared this very thoroughly." A flash of victory crossed Madison's lips. Cynthia let out a quiet sigh of relief, her own smile becoming a little more genuine. "This is my everything, Grammy," Madison said, her voice softening, becoming my sweet granddaughter again. "I truly believe this is the biggest opportunity of my life, a chance to build a solid future for myself." She had hit my weak spot, her future. What grandmother wouldn't do anything for the future of her beloved grandchild? The accountant's logic in my head was screaming about the vanity of a lavish party, about the cost of chasing virtual images online. But the grandmother's heart in my chest was fluttering at the prospect of a brilliant future for my only grandchild. Cynthia chose this exact moment to speak, her tone laced with a false sincerity and seriousness. "And Mom, it's not just about Madison's future. Do you have any idea how much Daniel's company has been struggling lately?" That question was like a needle piercing a worry that had been lingering in my heart for months. Of course I knew. I saw the exhaustion in my son's eyes, the deepening lines on his forehead each weekend. But Daniel was a proud man. He never complained. Cynthia pressed on, her voice full of implication. The connections Madison could make at this event, the big brands she could partner with, they could open new doors. Not just for her, but maybe for Daniel too. A real estate endorsement from one of Madison's partners. You see what I mean? This is a strategic investment. It was a devastatingly effective blow. Cynthia had skillfully transformed a frivolous birthday party into a business move that could save the entire family. She turned extravagance into an investment, indulgence into a responsible act. She was playing on my love for both my son and my granddaughter. I looked from Cynthia's calculating face to Madison's clear, hopeful eyes. For a moment, I saw their images overlap. One was the director, the other the actress, and I was the audience they had to win over at all costs. The stage had been set right here in my living room, and the play had only just begun. The project pitch was over, but the air in the room was still thick with grand words and ambitious goals. I knew that after the presentation of vision and mission would come the most critical part, the budget, the cold, hard numbers. The old accountant in me was ready to analyze and argue, but the grandmother in my heart was already starting to waver. My peaceful Sunday afternoon was gone. In its place hung a difficult choice, a choice that I felt, no matter what I decided, would come with a price I couldn't yet begin to imagine. The silence that followed Madison's presentation wasn't peaceful. It was a heavy, loaded space, filled with unspoken expectations. In that moment, my living room, which was used to little chats about the weather and my health, had transformed into a corporate boardroom. I was the chairwoman, the sole investor, and the two of them were the entrepreneurs, desperately pitching for capital. The tablet, with its final slide, "The future starts here," was still glowing like a defiant challenge. My brain, honed by 45 years of working with balance sheets, began its automatic analysis. I pushed aside the fancy words like vision and mission. To me, they were just window dressing. The core, the thing that always lies at the heart of any plan, is the numbers. A project without a detailed budget is just a daydream, and I knew the presentation on the numbers was about to begin. As if reading my mind, Cynthia cleared her throat softly, breaking the silence. The smile was still on her face, but it had shifted from a mother's pride to a CFO's focus. She leaned down and opened the thin leather briefcase I'd initially ignored. The sound of the two metal latches snapping open was sharp and clean in the quiet room. From inside, Cynthia pulled out not just a few sheets of paper, but a whole professionally bound portfolio. "I know you're a practical woman, Mom," she began, her tone shifting to one of serious respect. "Vision is important, but the financial foundation is even more so. That's why I've prepared a detailed cost analysis for this project." She placed the portfolio on the coffee table with both hands, a gesture so formal it was almost ceremonial. The cover was glossy cardstock, printed with the words, "Budget Proposal, the Madison Sinclair Brand Launch Event," in the same stylish font as the presentation. Everything about it screamed a chilling professionalism, a level of preparation that bordered on suspicious. I put on my reading glasses, feeling as if I were back in my old office. I took the document. The paper felt cool and heavier than I'd expected. The smell of fresh ink hit my nose, a familiar scent that felt strangely out of place in this context. I turned the first page. It was a summary page, presented as a colorful pie chart, and there, in the very center of the chart, was the grand total, bold and clear, like a fist to my chest, $28,000. $28,000. I had to read the number twice to make sure my eyes weren't deceiving me. The air was sucked out of my lungs. $28,000 for a 16-year-old's birthday party. The number wasn't just absurd, It was an insult to everything I had believed in and built my life upon: thrift, caution, and the value of a hard-earned dollar. My hand trembled slightly as I turned to the next page, where the cost items were listed in detail. Each line was like a knife cut to my senses. Venue rental, Crystal Cliff Villa, 8 hours, includes cleaning fee, $12. Catering service, set menu for 50 guests, non-alcoholic cocktail bar, and themed dessert station, $7,500. Decor and event production, concept, minimalist future, professional sound and lighting system, $4,000. Entertainment, DJ Z Vibe, 4 hours, $1,500. Event security, 2 staff, $800. Photography and videography, capture the moment package, including drone footage, $2,200. I stopped there, unable to read further. My head was spinning. $12,000 to rent a house for 8 hours? $7,500 for food and drinks that a bunch of teenagers would barely touch while glued to their phones? And DJ Z Vibe? Good heavens, what a ridiculous name. Cynthia seemed to have anticipated my reaction. She leaned forward, her voice soft and persuasive, like a financial advisor calming a panicked client. Mom, I know these numbers look big on their own, but please, look at the bigger picture. This isn't an expense, it's an investment. She helped me turn to another page, one titled Projected ROI, Return on Investment, Analysis. This page was filled with marketing jargon I didn't fully understand, but the message was clear: 200% increase in brand reach. Potential for is greater than $50,000 in endorsement contracts in the next quarter, establishing It Girl image as a trendsetter. It was all just vague promises, guesses dressed up in the language of data analysis. You see, Cynthia said, pointing to a bar graph, the media exposure this event will generate will have an equivalent value of 3, maybe even 4 times the initial cost. Brands don't pay for a post, they pay for a story, for a certain status, and this party is the opening chapter of that story. Madison, who had been quiet until now, chimed in. Her voice was innocent, but every word was carefully calculated. Grammy, I talked to the managers of some big influencers. They all say a huge launch event is a must-do. It's like a declaration to the world that says, I'm serious about this career. Career? I repeated, the word jarring in my ears. At 16, your career should be your schoolwork. Times have changed, Mom, Cynthia chimed in quickly, not giving me a chance to dig in my heels on the subject. Madison's generation. Well, they don't wait until they graduate from college to start building their future. They do it right now, on these very platforms. And it's our job, as the ones who came before, to give them the best possible conditions to succeed. The seamless way the two of them worked together sent a chill down my spine. One laid out the cold, hard business case, while the other used innocence and dreams to pull at my heartstrings. They were a perfect team, and I was their only target. My rational mind was still fighting back, kicking and screaming. Cynthia, $28,000 is a huge piece of my retirement fund, my nest egg. I worked my entire life for that money. I can't just throw it away on something so frivolous and risky. I understand. Cynthia nodded, her face a perfect mask of sympathy. I completely understand your caution. That's why I want you to look at it from a different angle. She paused for a beat, like an actress taking a breath before her most important line. Her eyes locked onto mine, and this time, she didn't bother hiding the urgency within them. Mom, think of this as a venture investment in her future. That line wasn't the kill shot, but the next one was. The connections Madison will make at this event, they could be what helps Daniel's company get through this rough patch. A heavy silence fell over the room after she said that. Daniel's name was spoken like a code word, a key that unlocked the door to my deepest fears. A rough patch. I knew it was worse than that. I saw it in his evasive phone calls, in the way he was losing weight, the dark circles under his eyes. My son, my pride and joy, was in trouble, and he was trying his best to hide it from me. Cynthia had just poked that raw nerve, with cruel and pinpoint accuracy. She had turned her granddaughter into a hostage, and my son's collapsing career into the ransom demand. Daniel's company? I asked, my voice hoarse. What does this have to do with Daniel? Everything, Cynthia said quickly, seizing the opening. On the guest list is the son of a vice president at a major investment firm Daniel has been trying to get a meeting with for months. There's also a luxury real estate blogger with hundreds of thousands of followers. Can you imagine? One post, one introduction from Madison in the right place, a connection made in a classy, intimate setting. It could change everything. This party isn't just about Madison. It's about our whole family. It was a perfect plan. A lie wrapped in layers of truth and affection. She used my love for Madison to disguise the extravagance, and my fear for Daniel to justify the cost. I was backed into a corner with no way out. If I said no, I wouldn't just be crushing my granddaughter's dream. I'd be seen as the one who turned her back on a chance to save her own son. I looked down at the portfolio in my hands. The lifeless numbers now seemed to dance and mock my helplessness. $28,000. It was no longer the price of a party. It was the price of hope, however flimsy and clumsily staged that hope might be. Madison, sensing my resolve crumbling, moved closer. She sat beside me and placed her soft hand on mine. "Grammy," she whispered, her big round eyes welling up with tears. "I know this is a lot to ask, but I promise you I won't let you down. I'll work so hard. I'll make our whole family proud." That touch, that whisper, and the tear threatening to spill from her eye, they were the final hammer blows, shattering the last defenses of my reason. I was no longer a sharp-witted chief accountant. I was just a grandmother, a mother, torn between the wisdom of my years and a love that knows no bounds. I looked out the window. The afternoon sun had deepened to a dark orange, signaling the end of the day, and I felt that a part of me was ending with it. My clarity, my resolve, it was all giving way to a single emotion, the desire to believe, the need to protect the ones I loved, at any cost. I took a deep breath, the smell of paper and ink still hanging in the air. "All right," I said, the sound coming from my throat feeling like it belonged to a stranger. "I'll invest." The moment the word invest left my lips, I saw a flash of light in Cynthia's eyes, an unmistakable wave of relief. Madison threw her arms around me in a tight, passionate hug. "Oh, thank you, Grammy. Thank you, you're the best in the world." In my granddaughter's embrace, I didn't feel the warmth of family. I just felt a cold emptiness spreading from my chest. The investment proposal still lay on the table, open to the cost analysis page. I knew I had just signed a contract without reading the fine print, and I had a terrible feeling that the real price was going to be much, much higher than $28,000. The moment I said the word invest, the very air in the living room seemed to shift. The thick tension that had been hanging like a thundercloud for the past hour suddenly vanished. It was replaced by a wave of relief, a rushed and somewhat artificial cheerfulness. Cynthia let out a long breath she'd clearly been holding, and her rigid shoulders finally relaxed. Madison was still hugging me, but I could feel the silent celebration in her body, the vibration of victory. "Oh, Mom, I don't know what to say," Cynthia began, dabbing the corner of her eye in a perfectly executed theatrical gesture. "You've given her the opportunity of a lifetime. Daniel and I will never forget this." I just nodded, unable to find the words to reply. My throat was dry. I felt exhausted, as if I had just gone through a grueling battle, not with fists but with my own mind and heart. $28,000. The number kept repeating in my head like a haunting refrain. That was 4 years of tuition at a state college. It was a down payment on a small condo. It was security for my old age, in case sickness decided to pay a visit, and I had just agreed to hand it over for an 8-hour party. I tried to soothe myself with the reason Cynthia had given me. This is for Daniel. This is a strategic move. I'm using a piece of my security to protect the future of my whole family. But deep down, the voice of the old accountant refused to be silent. It was screaming that I'd been played, that I'd made the most elementary financial mistake, letting emotion dictate an investment decision. Cynthia began to gather her things with a newfound briskness. She carefully placed the funding proposal back into the leather briefcase, snapping the locks shut with a definitive click. The sound was like a trap springing shut. It was all settled. The negotiation was over. I thought, at least the hardest part was done. I thought I could take a breath and start getting used to the giant hole that had just been blown in my savings account. I was wrong. While Cynthia was busy, Madison let go of me. She took a step back but kept hold of my hand. Her eyes looked at me, no longer filled with that tearful pleading, but with a sparkling, undisguised excitement. "Grammy, it's almost perfect now," she started, her voice sweet as honey. The phrase, "almost perfect," set off a tiny alarm bell in my head. Almost? Didn't we just approve a $28,000 plan? I looked at her, waiting. Cynthia stopped what she was doing and turned her attention back to us. I saw it immediately. This wasn't a spontaneous thought from Madison. This was Act 2 of the play, and it was fully scripted. Madison continued, her voice a practiced, professional innocence. "I had an online meeting with my content creation team yesterday. They went over the whole plan, the concept, my outfits. They said that for the video to be truly high class, for it to compete with the top influencers in the world, I need an iconic statement piece." "Statement piece?" I repeated, feeling a chill run down my spine. Her vocabulary was so corporate. Content creation team. At my age, the only team I knew was my team of cardiologists. Madison nodded eagerly, her bouncy hair swaying. "Yes, something elegant, luxurious, but still youthful. Something that when the audience sees it, they immediately recognize the quality. Something that can become a brand legacy." The moment Madison finished, Cynthia picked up the thread without missing a beat, as if they'd rehearsed this 100 times. Her voice was full of a fake, scholarly authority, like an art critic lecturing on a masterpiece. They suggested a Tiffany & Company necklace, the classic Return to Tiffany heart tag. "You know the one, Mom. It's not just a piece of jewelry. It's a legacy. It's class. It's a statement. It will elevate the entire production, from the photos to the highlight reel. It will tell the brands that Madison isn't just some teenager having fun. She's a professional, valuable brand." My heart started to pound. Tiffany & Co. The name was synonymous with luxury, with those little blue boxes that carry expensive dreams. Madison, as if on cue, held up her phone, the screen already open to the famous jeweler's website. She held it out in front of me. Against that iconic blue background, the image of the necklace was crystal clear, a delicate silver chain and a gleaming heart tag, and next to it, the price. Lance and Mayen. $2,000. For a silver necklace? "That's just ridiculous," I blurted out, unable to stop myself. $2,000 for such a tiny thing? "But that's the whole point, Grammy," Madison replied quickly, her eyes wide with conviction. "Its value isn't in the silver, it's in the blue box, it's in the name. When I wear it, everyone knows the story behind it. That's the power of a brand." My 16-year-old granddaughter was lecturing me on the power of branding. Me, a woman who'd spent her life calculating the true value of everything from raw materials to asset depreciation. A wave of anger and helplessness began to rise in me. This wasn't a request anymore, this was a brazen demand. But the performance wasn't over. Cynthia delivered the final blow. "And Mom," she said, her voice dropping to a serious, deliberate tone, "since we're elevating the visual statement piece to a new level with the necklace, the film crew has suggested an upgraded package. They would bring in a cinema-grade camera and a lighting specialist to capture the sparkle of the jewelry and Madison's aura perfectly. They said that without the right equipment, the investment in the necklace would be wasted." My head was buzzing. It was a perfect logic trap. They create a need, and then use that very need to justify a whole new set of cascading expenses. "And this upgraded package? How much is it?" I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be pleasant. Madison glanced down at her phone, as if the number were a trivial detail. "With $5,000 for the film crew, the total for the final image perfection package is only $7,000. $7,000. Added to the $28,000 from before. $35,000. A dead silence fell over the room. This time, even the grandfather clock seemed to hold its breath. I stared at the two of them. Cynthia's face remained calm, but I could see the nervous anticipation in her eyes. Madison, for her part, resorted to her ultimate weapon. She began to purse her lips, her eyes glistening, on the verge of tears. A look of profound hurt appeared on her beautiful face, as if my hesitation was a complete rejection of her dreams, of her very being. The old accountant in me was screaming, "This is madness. This is blatant manipulation. This is throwing money out the window. No, it's burning money to warm their vanity. Every cell in my body, every neuron trained by logic and numbers was in revolt. I should stand up. I should tell them to leave my house. I should say, no, a simple final word. But then I looked into Madison's eyes. And I didn't just see my granddaughter. For a split second, I saw Daniel as a little boy, looking up at me with those same big, trusting eyes. I saw all the hopes and dreams I ever had for my son, dreams of a happy, successful life. Cynthia was right. This party, in its own twisted way, was now tied to Daniel's well-being. And this necklace, as absurd as it was, had become a part of that rescue plan. My reason had lost. It had fought bravely, but it couldn't win against a fatal weakness: my boundless love and my fear of losing the people I cherish. Love, sometimes, isn't a strength. It's a burden, a chain that blinds you. I didn't say another word. My silence was the answer. I slowly stood up and walked to the old secretary desk in the corner where I kept my phone. The two of them watched my every move. I could feel their eyes fixed on my back. I opened my banking app. The numbers in my savings account appeared on the screen, the fruits of a lifetime of labor. I took a deep breath and initiated the transfer. $7,000. My finger trembled as I hit the confirm button. A small beep sounded from the phone, a soulless little noise that carried the weight of complete surrender. The screen flashed. Transaction successful. I turned around, not looking at Cynthia or Madison. I just stared into the empty space in front of me. "It's done," I said, my own voice sounding distant, like it was coming from a long way off. Madison rushed over and hugged me, even tighter this time. "I knew you'd understand. I love you so much, Grammy." I stood there stiffly, not returning her hug. I felt cold. A cold that started in my heart and spread through my entire body. I had just paid for a piece of jewelry and a film crew, but I knew I had bought something else. I had bought silence for my worries about Daniel. I had bought a smile for Madison, and I had bought an echoing emptiness for myself. When they left, Cynthia was glowing like she'd just won the lottery. Madison couldn't stop talking about calling her team immediately. They left as quickly as they had arrived, leaving me alone in the quiet house, with the scent of cold chamomile tea and a $35,000 hole in my soul. I sank onto the sofa. The sun had completely set. Darkness was creeping into the room, just like the unease that was creeping over me. After the door closed behind Cynthia and Madison, my house didn't just become quiet, it became empty. It was a tangible, heavy emptiness, as if $35,000 wasn't just numbers on a screen, but solid bricks that had been pulled from the foundation of my life. The next few days passed in a strange state of suspension. I waited for a thank you call from Daniel. I waited for Madison to send me pictures of the party designs. I waited for any sign that my investment was beginning to sprout, that my sacrifice wasn't in vain. But all I got was silence. That silence was more terrifying than any words. It seeped into my daily routines. The morning paper seemed duller, the crossword puzzles pointless. The chamomile tea I brewed each afternoon tasted like water. Order and logic, the guiding principles of my life, now seemed to mock me. I had done something completely illogical, and in return, I received nothing but silence. And then, Tuesday night came. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, trying to focus on a mystery novel, but my mind kept drifting. Outside, the night was dark, and the streetlights cast weak shadows into the room. The grandfather clock chimed 8, each bell a reminder of time passing, of the party drawing nearer, and of the growing distance in my family. It was then that my phone, sitting on the side table, let out a dry little buzzit. The sound, in the evening quiet, was sudden and jarring. My heart gave a little jump. Maybe it was Madison. Maybe she was calling to tell me about her exciting plans. A tiny, fragile sliver of hope flickered within me. I reached for the phone and put on my glasses. The screen lit up with a new text message. It was from Madison. My heart warmed just a little. I opened the message, and the words appeared, peppered with cheerful emojis. "Grammy is less than 3. I love you so much. But the concept for the event is Gen Z future, so it would be kinda weird to have older people there. You can watch the video I post after, it'll be amazing." Soxo. I read the message again, and again. 3 times. 4. The words stopped making sense. They were just hollow characters dancing in front of my eyes. Is less than 3. XOXO, I love you so much. Those sweet words were now like shards of glass, cutting me with a cruel, casual precision. It would be kinda weird to have older people there. Kinda weird. I, the woman who had funded this entire event, from the oceanfront villa to the glittering silver necklace, my presence was deemed kinda weird. I wasn't a guest of honor. I wasn't even on the guest list. I was a silent benefactor, an ATM, and nothing more, and now that my function was complete, my existence had become an inconvenience. The pain hit me then, not as a sharp stab, but as a cold, numbing ache. The phone felt heavy in my hand. It felt like someone had just sucked all the air from my lungs. I had imagined myself standing in a corner, quietly watching Madison shine, feeling so proud of my granddaughter. I thought I was part of this story, but no, I was just the one paying for the stage, and when the play was about to start, I was asked to leave so I wouldn't ruin the set. But then, following the pain, came another feeling, a chilling one. The accountant's instinct, the one that had been buried under layers of blind love, began to stir. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. This cruelty was too blatant, this exclusion was too absolute. If this was truly such an important networking event to save Daniel's company, why would they treat their main investor so dismissively? The story's logic began to crack. Cynthia's words about a strategic family investment now sounded like a farce. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring wide-eyed at the dark ceiling. Every tick-tock from the grandfather clock downstairs was a hammer blow against my temples. Madison's text message replayed in my mind, not with the initial sting of pain, but with a cold, analytical scrutiny. Every word, every emoji was dissected. The fake sweetness, the camouflaged cruelty. Those weren't the words of a thoughtless child. They were a calculated message, designed to both placate and discard. Around 2 a.m, unable to bear it any longer, I sat up. A restless energy urged me to do something. I threw on my robe and went downstairs. I didn't turn on the lights. The familiar darkness guided my steps. I walked toward my old home office, the room where I'd spent most of my life, where everything had its place and its logic. Lately, Madison had been using my old desktop computer. She'd said her MacBook wasn't powerful enough for editing her complex TikTok videos, while my old machine, though dated, had a powerful processor that Daniel had upgraded for me a few years back. I'd been happy to let her use it, pleased that my old things could still be useful to my granddaughter. I walked into the room and switched on the small desk lamp. A warm yellow glow spread out, illuminating the oak desk and the computer, which was humming quietly in sleep mode. I sat down in the chair, feeling the familiar comfort of the worn leather. I moved the mouse, and the screen blinked to life. And then, I saw it. Madison had forgotten. In her excitement, in her absolute confidence that her plan had been a roaring success, she had made a rookie mistake. She had forgotten to log out of her social media account. The browser window was still open, and the active tab was a platform I only vaguely recognized from Madison's descriptions, a colorful interface filled with short messages and icons. On the left was a list of conversations, and one of them, a group chat named the Victory Squad, was showing a new message. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. One part of me screamed to turn the computer off, to go back to bed, to not invade her privacy. But the other part, the old accountant awakened by suspicion, gave a cold, clear order. Look, you need to know the truth. My hand trembled as I clicked on that group chat. The conversation history loaded. It was full of teenage slang I didn't fully understand, memes, inside jokes. I scrolled up, past the meaningless chatter, and then I stopped. My eyes were glued to a conversation from Sunday evening, just a few hours after she and her mother had left my house. Madison's message was there, clear as day, sharp as a knife. It wasn't just one line. It was a victory report. Madison, Mission Retirement Fund Extraction complete. A friend replied with a series of crying, laughing emojis. Madison. The old ATM finally coughed up the $28K plus the little blue Tiffany box. Lol. The old ATM. The phrase pierced right through me. The air was sucked out of the room. I couldn't breathe. The pain from Tuesday night's text message was nothing compared to this. That was a scratch. This was a knife, twisted deep in my heart. All the love, the care, the gingerbread cookies, the hugs, it had all been boiled down to a single function, a cash machine. But it was the last message that truly killed the grandmother in me. Madison. Probably gonna block her number for a while after Saturday. Less hassle. Less hassle. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen. The room was so quiet I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. There were no tears. The pain was too vast, too deep for tears. It solidified inside me, turning into a block of ice. It was all clear now. The brand launch event, an investment in Daniel's future, the legacy necklace. It was all an elaborate stage play, a performance in which I wasn't just the audience, not just the backer, but the mark in a con executed by my own son, my daughter-in-law, and the granddaughter I loved more than life itself. The double cross. The betrayal wasn't being uninvited to the party. The real betrayal was that from the very beginning, my only role in their plan was the balance of my bank account. A cold fury replaced the pain. I know that sounds like a cliché, like a line from a cheap novel. But in that moment, in my office bathed in the blue-white glow of a computer screen before dawn, it was the only truth there was. The block of ice in my chest, formed from shock and hurt, didn't melt into tears. No, it hardened, grew denser, and sharpened itself into a dagger. I was no longer Madison's Grammy. I was no longer Daniel's mother. In that moment, I was Beatrice Sinclair, chief accountant, retired. And I had just discovered a catastrophic irregularity in my family's books, a fraud concealed not with false numbers, but with love and trust. The instincts of a 45-year career rose up, strong and decisive. My first reaction wasn't to smash something or to cry out. My first reaction was to secure the evidence. My hand, which had been trembling just an hour before, was now surprisingly steady. I moved the mouse cursor with cold precision. I took a screenshot of the conversation between Madison and her friends. Mission Retirement Fund extraction, the old ATM. Block her number for a while, less hassle. Every word was seared into my retinas like acid. I saved the image file to a new folder on the desktop. I named the folder Project Suite 16, and the image file I named Exhibit A. I didn't stop there. This betrayal was too systematic, too calculated. It couldn't have been the spontaneous idea of a spoiled teenager. There had to be a deeper cause, a greater desperation. Cynthia's lie about helping Daniel suddenly came back to haunt me. It wasn't a total lie. In every sophisticated con, you use a piece of the truth as bait. And I was determined to find that piece of truth. I spent the rest of the night, while the city outside was still fast asleep, conducting a full audit of my own family. My starting point was the Orange County Public Records website, a clunky, old government interface, but to me it was as familiar as the back of my hand. I'd spent thousands of hours of my life navigating similar systems, tracing money trails, verifying property deeds. I typed Daniel's company name into the search bar, Sinclair Development LLC. The first few results were normal, business licenses, tax registrations. But when I dug deeper, into the section for liens and mortgages, the red flags started to pop up. A notice of an overdue debt from a lumber supplier. Not a huge amount, a few $1,000s, but it was a sign of a cash flow problem. I kept digging. Another notice, this time from a concrete company, a larger sum. Then a third, from an electrical subcontractor. A picture was slowly emerging, and it wasn't pretty. Daniel's company wasn't just having a rough patch, it was bleeding out. It was being squeezed by creditors from all sides. But the business debts weren't the worst of it. True desperation always leaves a trail in personal finances. I got up and walked to the metal filing cabinet in the corner. I pulled open the drawer labeled Daniel Financials. Inside was a thin file. A few years ago, when Daniel and Cynthia wanted to refinance their house, I'd helped them look over the paperwork, check the terms. I knew their financial situation back then. A reasonable mortgage, a couple of car loans, nothing unusual. I pulled out their old credit report that I had saved. Then I went back to the computer, using one of the credit monitoring services I still subscribe to annually to keep an eye on my own score. I paid a small fee for access to Daniel and Cynthia's public credit reports. The truth was worse than I could have imagined. Comparing the old report to the new one was like comparing a photograph of a healthy person to an X-ray of a terminal cancer patient. A second mortgage had been taken out on their house, a loan they had never told me about. Their credit cards, which had carried only small balances a few years ago, were now all maxed out. Their total credit card debt was well into six figures. There was even a personal loan from a predatory lending company with an outrageous interest rate. They were drowning. They had borrowed from every possible source, digging one hole to fill another, until there was nowhere left to dig. Panic must have set in months, maybe even a year ago. And I, in my peaceful retirement, had been completely oblivious. I sat there, staring at the cold numbers on the screen. They told a story more tragic than any novel. A story of bad decisions, of a pride that wouldn't allow them to ask for help, and of a glamorous lifestyle financed by debt. Cynthia's mom influencer image on Instagram, the luxury vacations, the designer clothes for Madison, it was all a sham. A stage set built with borrowed money, and the creditors were now coming to tear it down. But there was still one final, horrifying piece of the puzzle. I went back to the county records site, this time searching by their home address, and then I saw it, a document filed just 3 weeks ago. Its title made the blood freeze in my veins. Notice of foreclosure sale. I clicked the link. The legal text appeared, dry and merciless. My son's house, the house where Madison grew up, where I had so many holiday memories, was going to be sold at public auction. The auction date, Friday, in 2 weeks' time. Everything crashed into place with a deafening roar in my mind. The party, the necklace, the $35,000. It wasn't an investment to save the company. The company was already unsalvageable. So was the house. It wasn't an effort to build Madison's brand. It was one last, frantic, desperate play. One final act of extraction, of squeezing what was left from the old ATM before everything collapsed. That money was probably for them to rent a new apartment, or to pay for lawyers, or maybe, in their ultimate delusion, to run away from reality, to live for a few more weeks in their luxurious lie before the truth caught up with them. The 16th birthday party in Laguna Beach wasn't a springboard to the future. It was a dance on the edge of the abyss. The sun was beginning to rise, the first rays of Wednesday peeking through the blinds, the light of a new day, but for me it only illuminated the wreckage of a family. The cold fury inside me was now fortified by undeniable proof. I was done doubting. I had the numbers, the documents. I had completed my audit. I calmly stood up. I went to the kitchen and brewed a strong pot of coffee. I didn't feel tired. My mind was sharper than it had ever been. While the coffee brewed, I turned on the printer and began printing out every single page of evidence, the screenshot of the chat, the notices of debt, the credit reports, and finally, the foreclosure notice. I stacked them in a neat pile on my dining room table, the same way I used to organize quarterly financial reports. Everything had to be in order. As I sat down with the hot cup of coffee in my hand, looking at the stack of papers before me, I knew their play was over. Wednesday morning arrived, not with the gentle promise of a new day, but with a cruel clarity. The sunlight wasn't warm, golden stripes dancing on my floorboards. It felt like the cold, probing fingers of an investigator, highlighting the pile of evidence I had meticulously arranged on my dining room table. The stack of white paper, with its soulless black text, sat there like an indictment. Each page was a chapter in a story of collapse, unpaid bills, maxed-out credit lines, and the final, fatal document, the notice of foreclosure sale. I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired. My state was beyond normal exhaustion. It was a terrifying lucidity, a wakefulness distilled from pain and betrayal. The coffee in my cup had long gone cold, but I held it anyway, the chill of the ceramic seeping into my skin as a reminder of the reality I was facing. I sat like that for hours, not to crumble or to mourn. I was waiting. In any plan, no matter how elaborate, there is always a weak link, a less than perfect accomplice, one whose guilt isn't as deeply ingrained, who will make a mistake under pressure. Cynthia was the director, Madison the star actress. But Daniel, my son, who was he in this production? A coerced victim? A weak-willed husband who knew nothing? Or a silent partner, a beneficiary of the deceit who chose to look the other way? The phone call I was waiting for would give me the answer. And then it came. Around 9 in the morning, as the sounds of a normal day, a neighbor's lawnmower, the rumble of the garbage truck tried in vain to pull me back to the real world, my phone rang. The classic ringtone I'd used for years suddenly sounded alien and shrill. The screen read, "Daniel." I let it ring twice more. It was a small, conscious assertion of power. I was no longer the doting mother who eagerly answered her son's calls. I was the one who held the truth. I was in control now. On the third ring, I answered. I didn't say, "Hello." I said nothing. I simply connected the call and waited in absolute silence. My silence seemed to throw him off. There was a pause on the other end, a moment of hesitation, followed by the sound of him clearing his throat. "Mom, you there?" Daniel's voice came through, and I immediately recognized the strain in it. It wasn't the warm, natural voice of my son. It was the voice of someone reading a script they didn't want to read. A fake cheerfulness was plastered over a thin layer of panic. "Daniel," I replied, my voice perfectly level, devoid of all emotion. "Ah, there you are," he said, trying to sound relieved. I was just calling to see how you were. Last night, Cynthia said there was a bit of a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated the word, savoring the way it hung in the air. Such a convenient word. A thin blanket used to cover an ugly truth. "Yeah, you know," Daniel stammered, clearly struggling for words. I could picture him pacing in a room somewhere, one hand running through his hair, the other gripping the phone. "About the party. Cynthia got a little carried away. And Madison's just a kid. They were just so excited." He was trying to downplay their guilt, blame it on being carried away and just a kid. He was trying to build a bridge for retreat, to get everything back to normal. But he didn't know that I had burned that bridge to the ground last night. "And that text Madison sent," he continued, "she just doesn't know how to phrase things, Mom. You know how kids are these days. They don't think. What she meant was, for the optics, you know, having multiple generations can sometimes..." Optics. That word. That hollow corporate word from the world of marketing campaigns and professionally packaged lies. It was the word Cynthia would use, and now my son was using it. In that instant, the final veil covering his complicity was torn away. He wasn't an outsider. He knew everything. He knew about the plan to get my money. He knew about the deceit. And he had let it happen. He was even participating in the cleanup, trying to soothe the old ATM to ensure the money tap wasn't turned off. A cold clarity shot through me. Daniel wasn't the weak link. He was an accomplice, the enabler for the entire charade. His silence hadn't been ignorance, it had been consent. I cut him off. My voice didn't rise. It actually dropped, becoming as sharp and precise as a scalpel. "Optics, Daniel?" The sudden silence on the other end told me I had hit my mark. The shift in my tone, the unmistakable coldness, had stopped him dead. I continued, letting each word fall into the space between us like a shard of ice. "Do you know what the optics are for a man who is about to lose everything?" The dead air on the line was louder than any confession. It was a silence filled with exposed guilt. I couldn't hear him breathing. I couldn't hear a sound. It was as if his entire world had just ground to a halt. I could picture his face, the confusion, the panic, and then the dawning horror as he realized that I knew. Not just about Madison's text, but that I knew everything. I had given him a chance to tell the truth, a chance to side with me, with what was right, but he chose to lie, he chose to protect the play, and with that choice, he had sealed his fate. After a long moment, a faint sound came from the phone, like air being squeezed through a crack. "Mom, what are you talking about?" But there was no surprise in the question. There was only the desperation of a man who had been caught. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My message had been sent. This call wasn't for a confrontation, it was for a confirmation, and I had the confirmation I needed. Daniel wasn't a victim, he was part of the problem. "I have to go now, Daniel," I said, my voice remaining level, distant. "I have other calls to make." And before he could say another word, before he could stammer out another lie, I ended the call. I set the phone down on the table. The click it made was sharp and final. There was no satisfaction in it, no feeling of victory, just a deep, heavy sadness. The sadness of witnessing my own son, the boy I had raised, become a stranger, a coward, willing to sacrifice his own mother to maintain an illusion. The call with Daniel was over, but the silence it left in the room had a completely different energy. It was no longer the silence of pain or waiting. It was the silence before a storm, the quiet of a war room just before the first command is given. The confirmation of Daniel's role as an accomplice didn't break me. It eliminated the last lingering remnants of hesitation I had. There was nothing holding me back now. No mother's love, no grandmother's forgiveness. There was only truth and justice, a justice as cold and precise as the numbers on a balance sheet. I did not allow myself time to grieve. Action is the only antidote to betrayal. I rose from the dining table, leaving the cold coffee and the stack of papers my indictment where they lay. I walked to my desk, the place where I felt most powerful, where logic reigned supreme. I opened the budget proposal portfolio that Cynthia had given me again. The glossy paper, the colorful charts, and the empty buzzwords looked ridiculous now. But inside that absurdity was the information I needed. The list of vendors, the people my money had been used to hire. They were the cogs in this machine of lies, and I was about to dismantle it piece by piece. My first act was to cut the power from the biggest source, the venue. I found the name of the luxury rental company, Coastal Dream Villas, a truly ironic name. I looked up their number online. When I dialed, my fingers were perfectly steady. My voice, when the operator on the other end picked up, was calm and professional. "Hello, this is Beatrice Sinclair," I began. "I'm calling in regard to an event booked at the Crystal Cliff Villa for this Saturday, under the Sinclair name." "Yes, Mrs. Sinclair, let me check for you," the woman on the other end replied cheerfully. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. "Ah, yes, I see it. The birthday event for Miss Madison Sinclair. Everything is confirmed. We're very much looking forward to hosting you." "I'm afraid I have to inform you," I said, my voice holding not a trace of regret, "that I wish to cancel this reservation." There was a pause. "Cancel?" the woman asked, the cheerfulness gone from her voice. "Ma'am, our policy states that any cancellation within 1 week of the event is subject to forfeiture of the entire deposit." "I'm aware," I replied. "I'm not asking for a refund. I am the individual who paid for this venue in full, and I am canceling it, effective immediately. Consider the funds a compensation for your inconvenience." The finality in my voice seemed to work. No one argues with a person willing to walk away from $12,000. "Oh, yes, ma'am. If you're certain, I will process the cancellation right away. Would you like an email confirmation?" "Yes. Please send it to my email address." I stated my address clearly, then added, "And please make a note in the file that anyone else from the Sinclair family attempting to rebook or alter this decision is not authorized. The transaction is final." "Understood, Mom." "Thank you," I said, and hung up. The first plug had been pulled. The magnificent oceanfront villa, the main stage for their play, had now gone dark. I didn't stop. I looked at the next item on the list, the catering company, Pallet Provisions. I picked up the phone again. The script was nearly identical. An event manager initially tried to talk me out of it, telling me about the special menu their chef had designed, about the future galaxy-themed mocktail bar Madison had requested. I listened patiently, and when he was finished, I said only one sentence. "I am the one paying the bill, and I wish to cancel the service." Just like before, the power of the payer was absolute. $7,500 in food and drink vanished into thin air, but I felt no sting of loss. I felt like I was cleaning up a mess, sterilizing an infected wound. Next was DJ Z-Vibe. That call was even quicker. The DJ sounded young, and when I said the event was canceled, his only question was, "So, do I get to keep the deposit?" I said yes, and he happily agreed. The party's dance floor would now be silent. Then came the decorators, the security firm, and finally, the film crew, the ones who had received $5,000 for their image enhancement package. Each call was a precise incision, a deliberate act of removal. With every call I finished, I felt the weight on my shoulders lessen. I was taking back control, not just of my money, but of the truth. When I set the phone down after the last call, my office was quiet once more. But this time, it was not the silence of loneliness, but of power. The entire infrastructure of The Madison Sinclair brand launch event had been dismantled by me in less than an hour. All that was left was an empty name. I knew the storm was coming. It wouldn't be long before one of these vendors called Cynthia to confirm the cancellation, or perhaps an automated email would be sent. And then, all hell would break loose. I didn't have to wait long. About 20 minutes later, my phone began to ring with a frantic, tortured urgency. The name Cynthia flashed on the screen. I watched it ring. Once, twice, 10 times. I let her panic soak into every shrill tone. I wanted her to feel the helplessness, the loss of control she had inflicted upon me. Finally, when the ringing became unbearable, I answered. "What did you do?" Cynthia's shriek stabbed into my ear, high-pitched and out of control. The calm, mom influencer facade had been completely stripped away, revealing a desperate, furious woman. "The villa rental company just called me. They said you canceled everything. Are you insane?" I held the phone slightly away from my ear, waiting for her initial wave of fury to pass. I said nothing. I met her screaming with a terrifying silence. My silence, I knew, would frighten her more than any accusation. "Mom, are you listening to me?" she yelled, her voice now trembling with panic. "Why would you do this? This is Madison's event, her future. You can't do this." When I felt she had spent her initial rage, I finally spoke. My voice was the same cold, level tone I had used with Daniel. "Cynthia," I said, and the way I spoke her name alone was enough to make her fall silent. "I'm detecting an inconsistency here." "What inconsistency?" she demanded, her voice wary. "Well," I said, drawing out the words, "as I was informed, the concept for this event is Gen Z future, and the presence of an older person like myself would be kinda weird." I could hear Cynthia's sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. I had turned the words from Madison's text against her. That was just a misunderstanding," she stammered, trying to regain her composure. "No, I think I understand perfectly," I continued, giving her no room to rebuild the lie. "And I've been thinking about it very logically. If my presence, as a person, was too embarrassing to be included on the guest list," I paused to give my next words their full crushing weight, "then my money is most certainly too embarrassing to be included on the invoices." The silence on the other end this time was absolute. I had flipped their logic on its head, using their own arrogance and cruelty as a weapon. I had drawn a clear line. If I wasn't good enough to attend, then my money wasn't good enough to fund it. I didn't wait for her to reply. I knew there was no reply to that. Their entire drama depended on their ability to have my money without having me. And I had just shown them that those two things could not exist separately. "I'll be waiting for you," I added before I ended the call. "Come here. We need to talk." The silence after my call with Cynthia lasted exactly 47 minutes. I had watched the clock. 47 minutes was the time it took for their panic to turn into action, for them to realize that frantic calls to the vendors were useless, and for them to understand that the only road left led directly to my front door. I used that time to prepare, not by making tea or baking cookies, as I once would have. I prepared my stage. I moved my laptop from the office to the living room and placed it on the coffee table, the screen facing the sofa where they would sit. I opened the screenshot of Madison's chat, Exhibit A, leaving it in full view. Next to the laptop, I placed the stack of documents I had printed the night before, the notices of debt for Daniel's company, their credit reports, and on the very top, like a trump card, the notice of foreclosure sale. Everything was ready. I sat down in my armchair, the one opposite the sofa, the position of power of the interrogator. I turned on no other lights except for the small reading lamp beside me, leaving the rest of the room in murky shadow. The light was focused on the coffee table, on the irrefutable evidence. And then they arrived. I didn't need to hear the doorbell. The sound of a car braking sharply and an angry slam of a car door down the street announced their presence. Seconds later, my front door flew open. They didn't even bother to knock. They stormed in like a hurricane, just as I had predicted. Cynthia was first. Her face was flushed, her perfect makeup smudged with angry tears. Her blonde hair was in disarray. The look of the successful mom influencer was completely gone, replaced by a woman on the verge of a complete breakdown. Daniel followed right behind her, looking even worse. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollowed out by dark circles. He wore a wrinkled shirt, as if he'd been sleeping in it for days. His expression was a mixture of desperation, shame, and a sort of impotent anger. He avoided my gaze. And last was Madison. She entered last, and her appearance was the most horrifying of all. I had expected to see remorse, fear, or at least the confusion of a child who'd been caught. But no, there was none of that. Madison walked in with her chin held high. Her big, clear eyes were not tear-filled. They were cold, sharp, and full of a brazen defiance. She crossed her arms over her chest and looked at me as if I were an annoying obstacle, a technical glitch that needed to be resolved. The sweet innocence was stripped away entirely, revealing a master manipulator in a teenager's body. They stood in the middle of my living room, panting, a family disintegrating before my very eyes. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Cynthia was the first to speak, her voice still trembling with rage. She began to sob, tears of failure, not remorse, streaming down her face. "You've destroyed everything, everything. Madison's one chance, our one chance." Daniel took a step forward, holding out a hand in a weak gesture of peace. "Mom, calm down," he said, his voice hoarse. "We can fix this. There's been a misunderstanding. You just have to call them back, tell them you've changed your mind." He was still trying to save the play. Even as the set collapsed around him, he was trying to patch together the pieces, still hoping he could deceive me one more time. I was silent, letting them exhaust their opening lines. I just sat there, in my armchair, observing them like a scientist observes specimens in a glass cage. And then Madison spoke. Her voice, unlike her parents', was perfectly calm, a chillingly cold calm. "You ruined my career," she said, looking me straight in the eye. Each word was enunciated with clear, steely precision. "Do you understand? All my potential brand deals, all the networking, it all depended on this event." I stared at my granddaughter. A career. At 16, after conning her own grandmother, after calling her the old ATM, she could still stand there and speak of her career with such righteous indignation. The sheer audacity of it was beyond anything I could have imagined. In that moment, I realized the child I had once loved was truly gone. She had been replaced by Cynthia's creation, a machine programmed to chase fame and money at any cost, with no moral compass, no empathy. The horror I felt quickly gave way to a steely resolve. I had given them their chance. I had waited for an apology, a sign of remorse, but all I had received were accusations and demands. It was time to bring down the curtain. I didn't say a word. I simply leaned forward and turned the laptop screen to face them. The light from the screen illuminated 3 stunned faces. The image of the Victory Squad group chat was in full damning display. A hush fell over the room. I saw the color drain from Cynthia's face, going from red to a pasty white. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out. She looked from the computer screen to Madison in utter horror. Daniel took a step back as if he'd been struck. He raised a hand to his mouth, his eyes locked on the words, "the old ATM." Shame and guilt finally registered on his face. But Madison once again surprised me the most. She glanced at the screen for only a second. Her expression didn't change, not a flicker of shame. Just a flash of anger in her eyes, the anger of a mastermind whose plan was discovered because of a stupid mistake. "You spied on my texts," she said, her voice ice cold. It was not a confession, it was an accusation. I ignored her. They still didn't understand the full scale of the collapse. They still thought this was about a canceled party and a few mean words. I leaned forward again. This time, I picked up the stack of papers from the table. With a slow, deliberate gesture, I tossed it onto the coffee table in front of them. The white sheets scattered, a few fluttering to the floor. The top sheet, with the bold heading, "Notice of Foreclosure Sale," landed face up, unmistakable. "A career?" I said, and this time my voice trembled, not with weakness, but with a fury that had been suppressed for too long. "You think this is about your career?" I stood up. For the first time since they had entered, I pointed at the stack of papers. This was not an event, this was a fraud. A last-ditch effort to bleed the last few dollars from my retirement fund before you all get thrown out of your house. I looked directly at Daniel and Cynthia, my rage now focused. "And you two," I said, my voice like steel. "You turned your own daughter, this child, into an actress in your pathetic, desperate play. You are not just financially bankrupt. You are morally bankrupt." The room was plunged into the silence of the naked truth. The stage had completely collapsed. The house lights were up, exposing all the cracks, all the filth behind the glamorous facade. No more lies. No more performances. Only the wreckage of a family. Cynthia finally broke. She crumpled to the floor, her ragged sobs echoing in the room. Daniel stood frozen, staring at the foreclosure notice as if he couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. Only Madison remained standing. She looked at me, her eyes no longer defiant, but filled with a cold emptiness. She understood now. The truth, once it's released, has a weight all its own. It doesn't need to scream. It simply exists, taking up all the space, suffocating every lie that once filled the room. Cynthia's broken sobs, Daniel's stunned silence, and Madison's vacant expression were the proof of its power. The stage they had so carefully built with deceit and manipulation was now nothing but a pile of ashes at their feet. I stood there, looking at the wreckage I had created, but I felt no satisfaction. There was only a deep, profound sadness, heavy as a stone on my chest. Sadness for the son I had raised to be a weak man, for the daughter-in-law who had let her obsession with image destroy her family, and most of all, for the granddaughter whose childhood and decency had been stolen from her. But sadness could not change what had happened. Now was the time for accountability. Cynthia, still kneeling on the floor, looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. I didn't know what else to do. We were so desperate. The creditors, the bank, they were calling all day. I just wanted a little more time." "Time?" I asked, my voice no longer angry, just weary. "Time for what, Cynthia? To keep lying? To keep living in a fantasy world while your real one was burning down? Was $35,000 going to save your house?" She shook her head, her sobs racking her shoulders. "No, it couldn't. It was too late. The money, I was going to use it to rent a new apartment, to start over, so Madison wouldn't be embarrassed in front of her friends." The confession, as pathetic as it was at least the truth. I looked at her, a woman who had been driven to the brink of madness by the fear of losing her status, her image. She had been willing to sacrifice her own dignity, her husband's, and her daughter's, just to maintain an illusion. "And you?" I turned to Daniel, who still stood motionless like a statue. "Where were you in all of this, Daniel? Did you know about this plan?" He wouldn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the floor, as if searching for a crack to disappear into. He began, his voice a mumble. "I knew Cynthia and Madison wanted to ask you for help. I didn't know the details." "Don't lie to me, Daniel," I said, my voice hardening. "Not now. Did you know they were conning me? Did you know they were calling me the old ATM? Did you know the real purpose of this money?" His silence was the answer. The guilty silence of a man who knew, but chose to do nothing. "So that's how you face your problems," I continued, my disappointment greater even than my anger. "You run. You ignore them. You leave everything to your wife, let her make desperate, insane decisions, and turn your daughter into a tool. You haven't just failed as a businessman, Daniel. You've failed as a husband and a father." Every word was like a whip crack against his already shattered pride. He flinched, and for the first time, I saw tears well up in my son's eyes. They were not tears of remorse, but of self-pity. Then, I turned back to Madison. She still stood there, silent and defiant. Throughout this entire confrontation, she hadn't shed a single tear, hadn't shown a flicker of remorse. "And you?" I said, my voice softening slightly, not out of forgiveness, but from an unspeakable sorrow. "Do you have any idea what you've done, Madison?" She shrugged, a gesture of such cold indifference. "I just did what my mom told me to. She said it was the only way." "No," I said firmly. "Do not blame your mother. She may have been the director, but you were the star of the show. You chose to say those words. You chose to send those texts. You chose to look your grandmother in the eye and lie." I stepped closer to her until I could see my own reflection in her empty eyes. "I gave you $35,000, Madi, but do you know what you gave me in return? You showed me the truth of this family. You showed me the lie you were all living in. In a way, I have you to thank for that." My sarcastic words seemed to finally get through to her. Some emotion flickered across her face, confusion, maybe a hint of shame. "This is not a career, Madison," I went on, my voice firm. "A career built on deceit and manipulation isn't a career, it's a prison. You are turning yourself into a puppet, dancing for likes and views, believing your value lies in expensive brands or fancy parties." I pointed at Cynthia and Daniel. Look at the result of chasing illusions. A mother so desperate she has to con her own mother-in-law, a father so cowardly he can't face the truth. Is this the future you want? Is this the brand you want to build?" For the first time, the confidence on Madison's face wavered. Her lips tightened, and she turned away, unable to look at me any longer. I had exposed them all, the desperate director, the emotionless star, and the weak-willed accomplice. The play had been analyzed, role by role, motive by motive. There was nothing left to hide. I returned to my armchair, feeling a heavy exhaustion settle over my body. "You two," I said to Daniel and Cynthia, "turned your own daughter into the worst version of yourselves. You taught her that image is more important than honesty, that money can buy happiness, and that a family's love can be reduced to a financial transaction. You took her innocence and replaced it with calculation." I looked at Madison one last time. "And you, child, you learned your lesson all too well. You became a brilliant actress in this miserable play." The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't the silence of shock, but of acceptance. The truth had been laid bare, the roles exposed. There was nothing more to say. All that was left was to face the consequences. The end came quickly and inevitably, like a natural consequence of the law of gravity. There was no miracle. No last-minute investor appeared to save Daniel's company. 2 weeks later, the foreclosure notice was no longer a threat. It became a reality. Daniel's company officially filed for bankruptcy. Their house, filled with memories both real and fake, was sold at auction. I didn't go. I couldn't bear to watch the fruits of my son's labor, however misguided, be bid on and sold off like a piece of merchandise. The glamorous world Cynthia had built on Instagram collapsed overnight. Without a luxury home as a backdrop, without expensive trips to show off, a mom influencer account becomes worthless. It exposed the harsh truth of the virtual world. You are only as valuable as what you can project. When the facade is gone, you are left with nothing. Cynthia, the woman who once looked down on desk jobs, now had to face reality. She found a job as a cashier at a local supermarket. I would sometimes pass by and see her in the drab green uniform, mechanically scanning items with a robotic smile. The glow was gone, replaced by fatigue and a quiet shame in her eyes. Daniel moved into a small rental apartment with Cynthia. The collapse of his company seemed to have broken him completely. The pride of a real estate developer was gone, leaving a defeated, middle-aged man struggling to find a new job in an unforgiving market. And Madison, the biggest shock was perhaps for her. When the house was lost, they had to move to a cheaper area, which meant Madison had to transfer to a regular public school. No more wealthy friends, no more hallways glittering with designer brands. She had to face a world where a person's worth wasn't measured by their TikTok followers or the label on their jacket. The real world, in all its raw and sometimes cruel honesty, had come crashing down on her. During that time, I kept my distance. I did not extend a hand to rescue them unconditionally. This shock, this collapse, was a lesson they had to learn for themselves. Sometimes, love isn't about sheltering someone, but about letting them face the consequences of their own actions. There was one thing I didn't do. I never asked about the Tiffany & Co. necklace. I let Madison keep it. That $2,000 object, the thing she had craved as a symbol of status, now carried a completely different meaning. I imagined her keeping it in its box, never daring to wear it. Every time she looked at it, she would remember not a grand party that never happened, but the price of a lie. That little blue box was no longer a symbol of luxury. It was a permanent emblem of a scar on her soul, a reminder of the dignity she had lost. It would be her glittering burden to bear. A few months later, after the dust had settled, I did one last thing. I went to my lawyer and set up a trust fund for Madison's college education, but it was not an unconditional gift. It came with strict conditions. To access the funds, Madison had to maintain good grades in school. She had to hold a part-time job, at least 15 hours a week, throughout her high school years. And most importantly, she had to complete 100 hours of community service each year. She had to learn the value of a dollar earned through honest work, and she had to learn to give without expecting anything in return. She had to relearn empathy, the true measure of a person's worth. I sent a copy of the trust's terms to their apartment. I didn't get a thank you call, and I didn't expect one. This was not an act of forgiveness. It was an act of hope, a final investment, not in a brand, but in a lost soul. I don't know if Madison will find her way back. I don't know if she can wash away the calculation and selfishness her parents instilled in her. The road ahead for her will be long and difficult, but I have given her a chance, a path, if she is brave enough to walk it. I still live in my quiet house, with the steady tick-tock of the grandfather clock and the faint scent of chamomile tea. Everything seems to have returned to the way it was, but something has changed forever. The pain of betrayal has faded, but the scar remains. More than a year has passed since the velvet curtain fell so harshly on my family's drama. Autumn has returned, bringing with it a cool breeze and turning the leaves outside my window to gold. My house is the same, still quiet and orderly, but the quiet holds a different meaning now. Before, it was peace. Now, it is a space for reflection, a place where the echoes of the past still linger, not as a haunting, but as a constant reminder. I've asked myself many times, what was the real lesson here? At first, the anger and sense of betrayal made me see only their faults. Cynthia's vanity, Daniel's cowardice, Madison's selfishness. But time, like a patient physician, has slowly worn away the sharp edges of my rage, revealing a more complex and painful truth. The lesson wasn't just for them, it was for me too. I realize now that in my blind love, I had unintentionally helped cultivate the soil where the lies took root. I was too quick to accept explanations, too quick to soothe my own anxieties with sweet hugs. I used money as a sedative for problems that should have been confronted with truth. I made investments without demanding transparency. I, a chief accountant who lived and died by numbers and facts, allowed a giant emotional loophole to exist in my own family's ledger. My complicity wasn't silence, like Daniel's. It was a willful ignorance. I didn't want to see the cracks, because I was afraid that if I looked too closely, the whole wall would come down. And in the end, it did. Our lives now are a picture of slow, awkward reconstruction. There are no more boisterous Sunday afternoons filled with plans and projects. Instead, about once every 2 weeks, Daniel will stop by, alone. He usually comes on a weeknight, dressed in simple work clothes. He found a job as a manager for a small construction firm, a position far below being an owner, but it's an honest job. Our conversations were difficult at first. We talked about the weather, my garden, anything but the giant elephant still lingering in the room. But slowly, bit by bit, we began to talk about real things. He told me about the pressure he'd faced, the shame of his failure, the way he had let his pride consume his reason. He hasn't apologized directly. Daniel was never good with emotions, but in the way he looks at me, in the way he listens quietly when I talk about my own pain, I see a genuine remorse. Our relationship is being rebuilt, not on the foundation of unconditional motherly love, but on a new kind of respect, an understanding of each other's mistakes. I see Cynthia less often. I think her shame is too great. Occasionally, when I'm at the supermarket, I'll deliberately choose her checkout line. We exchange only a few pleasantries. Hi, Mom. Hello, dear. How are you today? I'm well. But I see a change in her. The tension in her face has eased. Perhaps no longer having to carry the weight of a false image has brought her some kind of release. And Madison. My relationship with her is the most complicated. She has never directly said she is sorry, but her actions speak volumes. I get quarterly reports from the trust. Her grades are very good. She's working at a local coffee shop, and her manager sent me a short note praising her work ethic. She has also been volunteering at a soup kitchen every weekend. Sometimes, she'll send me a short text. I hope you're well, Grammy. No heart emojis, no XOXO. Just simple words, but they are more real than 1,000 of the fake I love yous from before. Last month, On my birthday, a small basket of flowers was left on my doorstep. There was no card, but I knew it was from Madison. It was a bouquet of wild daisies, the kind she knows I love. I know my family will never go back to the way it was. The scar will always be there, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the cost of deceit. But maybe that's a good thing. We are no longer building on a rotten foundation. We are clearing away the rubble and beginning to lay the first new bricks slowly, carefully, and above all, honestly.